If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Yeah, I know a lot of you were expecting that I was going to give the business to Don Lemonade, and I'll be doing that in tomorrow's Morning of Truth briefing. But tonight, there's another subject, or rather issue, that I've been meaning to address. Something that we can all take forward with us as we continue to wage this war against white supremacy. Repetition, it is said, is the mother of learning. It's also the mother of ignorance, too. As the black media, and this includes you, we have to exercise that principle of repetition vigorously and understand this is how people learn things. You can go all the way back to how our ancestors, even if they were deprived of literacy, were able to teach one another things. The so-called call and repeat, that kind of thing. Well, it doesn't stop there. Why do you think I make it a point to repeat things? From the way that I open and close my videos to the catchphrases that I'll use on a frequent basis. Why do you think that is? Why do you think I say it so much and so often? So that you remember it. The enemy certainly understands this principle. You look at broadcast and online white media, you see that they repeat the same talking points endlessly. What they do isn't mass media. It's mass mind control, or rather mass mind bending. This is how right-wing hate radio came to be so effective. All of these bloviating bigots from Neil Boortz to Rush Limbaugh, their so-called radio shows were the exact same sermon of bile every single day. If you heard it once, you literally heard it 1,000 times. It never got any different and never got any better. And the fact that there were entire radio stations, multiple stations in the larger markets, who put out this message like so much Nazi propaganda tells you that someone wanted this message out there. Somebody with a lot of money. Someone who benefited from it being out there. And the fact that in all these decades you have never heard a message like this, like the black media in any sort of white media space, that tells you that someone didn't want this message out there. And you see by the way that we've been able to get people on the right track, we've been able to straighten people's minds out, and to finally begin a counter-narrative, even as modest and small as our efforts may be. Nobody's going to put big money behind black empowerment because black empowerment is not currently what drives economics. Economics is driven by the stranglehold that white power has on resources. But the truth of the matter happens to be it's a lie, and given enough time, even a small amount of truth can put cracks in that wall, if not crumble it all together. But it's not going to be an easy process. And as black people, we have to understand repetition is also part of how progress gets made. You have to stick to the same thing over and over again. Nobody has ever built a house or lost weight or built a business off of a one and done anything. You have to come back to it day after day after day, over and over and over. It's not about keeping you entertained or engaged. It's about keeping you on track, keeping your eye on the ball. And when you start to extend this to other people, trying to make sure that their minds are right, you got to understand that the message must be repeated. Repetition is one of our best weapons. The enemy repeats certain things. Phrases like political correctness, reverse racism, critical race theory more recently, and DEI, until they felt that these lies caught on. And you also notice that their adherents, the rank and file for the loyal opposition, they never get tired of hearing the phrases and words that they want to hear. Why? Because it validates them. For all of their mendacity and evil, and they are the soul of evil, they do have one thing right, which is when you give them the message that they want to hear, they don't want to hear anything else. They understand focus. When you work in advertising, you're taught that all effective advertising is simply creative nagging, and that an ad has to be seen at least 7 times before somebody remembers it, and 20 times before there's a chance that they'll buy your product or service. Political discourse works along the same principle. It's the socio-economic equivalent of advertising. You're trying to sell someone on something. And the same way when a commercial comes on TV, there are folks who in between their TV shows are likely to switch the channel. You have to also understand that when you give somebody a message that isn't playtime, they're likely going to be looking around going, where's the diversion at? Where's some fun? This doesn't seem very entertaining to me. For almost 20 years now, I've been telling you that phrase, that what the black media does is not meant to be politically oriented entertainment. It is a witness and a warning. But there was also something else that I would tell you when it comes to black empowerment becoming the status quo. And that is, if you're not willing to abide by the principles of black empowerment now, are you really doing anything other than kidding yourself when you say that you'll do it later? White supremacy will not stand forever. I'm not saying that it's going to fall next week or even necessarily in our lifetimes, but it will fall because all empires crumble. The question is, what are you going to do or your children when that day comes? If you have not been practicing a particular behavior, if you haven't been practicing a particular ideology or philosophy, then whenever danger comes, whenever change threatens, you're likely to go ahead and cower into a ball, or worse, you're likely to surrender to whomever comes along. You will give up the very black empowerment that so many people fought and bled and died for. In times past, whenever an enemy army would come into a particular village or come into a particular city, they would make sure to go after the griot first. The griot would be basically the guy whose job it was to pass on the ancestral knowledge and the folklore and folk tales of a particular group of people, their ethnic group, their tribe, their village, what have you. Well, when the bad guys showed up, they understood that this person was a living repository for the knowledge, history, and thought of an entire culture. And if you're going to take a group of people and try to reduce them to nothing more than slaves, that is zombies, you have to erase their memory first. And that means the griots historically were the first ones who got killed. Whoever the guy it was whose job was to maintain the memory of the people, he was also among the first to be killed. But at least back then, people actually understood and valued knowledge. They understood how important it was to have certain information that was repeated one generation after the next. This was not merely some stories being told. These were the things that made it where their people survived and were able to prosper. And they also understood what the cost could be if they forgot it. Family, what I'm trying to say is that even if white supremacy never existed, we as a people would still have to internalize and repeat and keep alive the messages and the knowledge that enables us to have our power and our strength. That's not the kind of thing that just comes along naturally. It's like saying that if somebody sits around like a couch potato, they're going to get themselves in good physical shape. It don't work that way. You got to put in the effort every single day. And that's also true at the group level. When it comes to a message, whether it be economic, political, or social, the same rules apply as with advertising. You have to repeat it a number of times just in order for people to remember it. And to convince them of something takes even longer. Even more repetition is required. Hell, the white media's convinced people of things that don't even exist simply by repeating it over and over and over again. Now, we know what the problem is there. Unfortunately, most people, they just take things at face value. They don't even think. Somebody tells them something, especially if they're wearing a suit, and they seem to be in an authoritative setting. It's all just social theater. Well, they'll go ahead and think, well, there must be something valid about it on some level, right? But of course, that wasn't true at all. See, that's what happens when repetition is used the wrong way. Repetition, when used constructively, is an important way of keeping people on course. And one thing we have to repeat to people over and over is to think for yourself. That's important because the white media makes it a point to put all of these so-called experts in front of you. And isn't it interesting how the experts are always individuals who repeat the party line? They'll say whatever is expedient for white supremacy's interest. They don't ever bring on any experts and prop them up and make them prominent and show them as being the authority on things if they're saying something that goes against white supremacy's interest. And then they'll have you repeating the same gibberish. Don't ever let someone turn you into their meat puppet simply because they said something a few times. Think about the uprisings and protests that took place from Ferguson to George Floyd. The white media tried endlessly to drag out the old playbook. They just kept putting on these crusty, dusty preacher mans, or they bring them into the middle of some young people who are out there fighting for their freedom. They'd send some civil rights retreads to try to tell these young people to stop fighting evil. And those young people sent those bootlicks packing. And why was that? Because for the first time, they had heard another message repeated. The message of the black grassroots. Even those who are not necessarily big fans of what we say, they still have to reckon with it regardless because we've turned it into part of the landscape. We are part of the discourse, and we've had an impact. We've had an effect. Of course, you're going to have people who try to downplay us and minimize us and try to say that we're some sort of disruptors. Well, they do have a point on that score, but tell me something. What makes the difference between being a disruptor and being the mainstream? Repetitive success. That's what. When you're successful over and over again, sooner or later you stop being on the fringe, you stop being on the outside, and you start to get to the very heart of things. You're at the center of it all. That is what we've been fighting to do, and that's what we're going to keep fighting to do. That's why the white media and their flunkies had to retreat back to the safety of their sound stages. Because repeating the same old lies didn't work anymore. You see, repeating a big lie only works until someone starts to repeat just a little bit of truth. That's the reason why, from the white media to every other form of oppression, they got to make sure that they silence anyone who says otherwise. Because lies, even as big as they may be projected to be, they really cannot stand up to a small amount of truth. So it's key, it's crucial. You have to make sure that nobody is allowed to even disagree. And if they do, well, you go ahead and demonize them. Tell people, like, don't listen to those guys. They're a bunch of lunatics. They're a bunch of kooks. They're a bunch of fringes. These people, they're just the far fringe, and you don't want to be one of them, do you? Don't you know that's how you put people on a treadmill to nowhere and keep them there? Literally marching in circles, walking in circles. It was because the white media and the white political establishment spent decades propping up tools and shills to remind us constantly that too many people had died for our right to vote. But of course, they never, not even once, pointed out that neither political party did a thing to avenge even one drop of that black blood. You don't do voting simply as a civic exercise. That's futile. Voting is supposed to be about getting something, getting your tangibles, and getting your payback. Showing up to cast a ballot is never supposed to be the goal. The goal is supposed to be what that ballot gets you. Elections are supposed to be transactional. That is, if you have political maturity. But then again, if you've been made politically ignorant through decades, if not centuries, of endless indoctrination, hearing the exact same thing over and over again, then they can dumb you down. In fact, in the wrong hands, repetition is used as a form of desensitization, because that's how desensitization works. You desensitize people by repeating a particular stimuli over and over and over and over again. The first time it may be shocking, second time surprising, third time it's boring. White supremacy understands that principle too, because they've used it all the way to the present. Black folks have known from the very beginning that the brutality and murders we've been subjected to, particularly by the police, wouldn't be stopped by body cameras. That's not to say that body cameras are a bad thing, they're not. But it is to say that all of these so-called civil libertarians and social liberals who've been preaching this little sermon of, well, if there were just more body cameras, that would make a difference. Black folks said no, the body cameras wouldn't make a difference. All you would do is have a video library of snuff films. Body cameras are supposed to be part of an overall means of making sure that these criminals are held accountable, is to make sure that they get punished. It is to document their crimes for the sake of punishing them. But body cameras alone were never supposed to be looked at as some sort of deterrent. We knew that they weren't going to deter anybody, but they could be used in order to make sure that these scumbags didn't get away with it. But there were so many people who just basically say, well, body cameras is pretty much all you need. Yeah, but now that you got white folks getting killed in Minneapolis, all of a sudden a lot of those same people who either have been saying body cameras alone were the answer, or who weren't saying much of anything at all, they're now admitting that they know that body cameras alone were never going to solve this problem.
There are Democrats willing to make a deal to fund because body cams. And I will repeat my observation from Monday. Wow, body cams. Because the thought that the next time they kill some unarmed or disarmed American citizen, there might be video of it, that sure held ICE back from murdering Alex Preddy. It sure held ICE back from murdering Renee Good.
Yeah, repeating the same old gibberish rings a little bit hollow when the bullets start hitting close to home. Another reason the repetition is important is because, quite frankly, memories are short. People don't remember things, or at least they don't like to. And that includes the harsh lessons that should have stuck. Your survival depends on you remembering things. And even when you've won a particular argument, you still have to keep repeating it anyway. Why? Because as I've always taught you, the enemy will go silent when they feel that they've lost a debate. When they know that they've lost, they're not going to admit that they were wrong. Instead, they're going to shut up and clam up. At least for a little while. They'll wait to see whether or not you're going to stop speaking that truth. And as soon as you do, they're going to start slithering out of their holes and they're going to start repeating the lies all over again. That's the reason why I made it a point to remind you about the deadly deception of Kamala Harris so that you would see whether or not any of her garbage had changed over the years, or rather decades, and it hasn't. When Biden ran for office, I made sure to remind you of what his phony, hollow promises were. And then, when he predictably went back on all of it, decided that he was going to claim that he couldn't do it, to say somebody else needs to handle it, I'm just too busy, I made sure to remind you of that too. You see, it's very difficult to memory hole something when somebody's got it on repeat nonstop. Truth is the only antidote to lies. And if you want to keep it front of mind for people, you better say something over and over until they get tired of hearing it. Because that's the only way to know that they got it. As part of the black media, you too are an essential, crucial, indispensable part of making sure we get the message out there. But the message can't just be said once, it must be repeated. Because when somebody tries to tell you that they're tired of hearing the truth, what that really means is it's making them uncomfortable. What they're really saying is, they haven't heard it enough. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Stephen12, Reasonable Dude, Kwanzaa JV, Colin Dozier, and Leonard Cottingham. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.